Okay. New episode of Candid with Candice. We're going to talk about toxic parenting. So, if you are new here, I am Candice Olivia of Candice O Beauty. I am a beauty and lifestyle content creator, influencer. If you are new to me doing Candid with Candice, my format is pretty much because, we're still a beauty blogger over here. If I have products to talk about, or share things I'm liking, I'm loving, or I'm trying, I go ahead and I share a little bit of that. Little shooting the shit, seeing what's going on with you guys. And then if there's a topic or anything, then we'll go ahead and get to it. I do have some new things that I'm trying and I'm currently liking thus far. If you've been keeping up with my stories and been keeping up with my beauty journey, like over the past 6 months, y'all know that I have been missing retinol. So I do have some new retinol product that I am trying. It is the Peter Thomas Roth Retinoid Peptide Serum. I've been trying this. So far, so good. I am also using the Peter Thomas Roth eye cream. I'm liking that as well. I got the Paula's Choice little lip balm. Y'all saw me unbox this yesterday. They sent it. I like her. She's really good. But I will say this is more part of I would keep this skincare treatment. I would do this after my morning routine. I'll do this after my nighttime routine and go to bed. I don't know. The way she feels, she's just too good. She's not going in my purse. I'm not losing her. She stays in the beauty stash on the shelf with everything else. This, we know I already have this, but Bliss gifted me another one yesterday. So maybe I will be giving this away to someone. This evening, we will be talking about how to navigate relationships with toxic parents. This is not something that I haven't mentioned briefly before. Whether it's, my strained relationship with my mom. I don't necessarily share too much about my dad or anything like that. But what I do want to say is anything that is said or shared by myself, I can't speak for anybody else, but anything that I say or I share this evening, it does not come from a place of malice. It does not come from a place of hatred or anything towards my parent or anybody else's parent. The first thing, one thing I will say is I did collect the questions. So if you see me looking off to the side, because I had to write some of the questions down because I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. But I do have 8 questions, and some of them were repeating, but I do have 8 overarching questions that were asked. So if you don't know me personally or don't know anything, about my relationship, with my parents or anything like that, I am 37. I am of my parents. My mother has 3 children, but I'll be 37 in September. Well, child, we rounding up. Okay. I got less than 2 months. So about to be 37. Sorry. I am the oldest of 3 children. I am the only girl. I do have a strained relationship with my mother. While my relationship with my father may not be strained, it is very interesting because that is a very interesting bird. Okay. When it comes to the parents that I am the victim, maybe not too wrapped up in reality parent. I also have a textbook narcissist, gaslighter, emotionally and verbally abusive parent. And I have learned a lot about myself and how I deal with people in my relationships with my parents, or the lack thereof. I will say I have been in therapy for 3 years. I have been in therapy for 3 years. And I'm not going to lie, my very first session, and I always tell people this, my very first therapy session, my therapist asked me, "Why are you here?" And I told her, because I want to get married and I want to have children, and I don't want to take generational curses with me. A lot of our relationships with our parents, these toxic relationships that we have, whether you realize it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, they are cyclical. This shit did not start when they gave birth to us. This shit started with their grandparents and their great-grandparents. This is cyclical. This is not us. But we can do as much as we can to divert this and not be this for the next generation, not be this for our children, right? And that's always been my goal. If you know me, my biggest thing is I don't want to grow up to be the bitter black bitch, and I don't want to take generational curses with me, period. So anything that I can do, look, Iyanla, pathology. And I'm also Iyanla to the bullshit, not on my watch. Not on my watch. I will not be this to my children. I guess I can kind of get into the questions. One of the main questions is, how do I set healthy boundaries with my parents? And the first thing I can say about setting a healthy boundary with a toxic parent is realizing first that they are flawed humans. You have to realize first that your parents are flawed humans, period. They did not and do not know what the fuck they are doing. And I don't have children, but I have a plethora of friends who have children. And the first thing y'all always tell me is, no one knows what they're doing. We're all just winging this shit. Our parents were winging that shit. They've been winging this shit for 40 years. And with the shitty tools that their parents gave them. Period. So the first thing I had to do, because honestly, before I realized I had a flawed relationship with my dad, I honestly did not know that I had a flawed relationship with my dad until I started therapy 3 years ago. I thought me and daddy were cool. I honestly didn't realize I had daddy issues until I started therapy. My dad is the gaslighter, the verbally abusive, the control freak, his way or the highway. And I didn't see that. I didn't see that at all. But I can say, living with my dad as an adult, then I realized, ooh, this nigga not who I thought he was. Great father, great provider, shitty partner. When you start being an adult and growing up and living life, now I always tell y'all, life be lifing. When you start living life and then you see your parents, sometimes shit look a little bit different, right? So I had to start seeing my parents as people. One of the things that helped me get to a place that I could healthily set boundaries with my mom was seeing her just as a woman. Seeing her as a woman who was trying to figure things out. My parents have known each other since they were 9 years old. They got married when they were 19. They had me at 21, and then they had my brother when they were 23. They had a house and 2 kids and 2 cars by the time they were 24, 25. I'm damn near 37. I still don't know what I'm doing. So I see my parents as people first. I do not take anything away that I have experienced, though. There are sometimes you can see your parents as people and still know that something they did in a particular situation was completely fucked up. However, I do think sometimes there's levels, like our parents are flawed, whether it's if you're dealing with a narcissist, if you're dealing with someone who is physically or verbally abusive, if you are dealing with abandonment, whatever reason they checked out, whether it was drug use or whatever it is, that person was coping the way that they knew how to cope. Okay? Setting healthy boundaries with my parents, though, is honoring myself before I honor them. And I know sometimes that's hard for Black folks, especially if you grew up in the church, because they will constantly browbeat you with honor thy mother and thy father. And I am telling you to honor yourself as a person before you honor them. Because I think the clashes that I've had with my parents when I do stand up for myself, I have found, in maybe not so much with my dad because he don't know how to say it, but I know I can tell sometimes with my mom that while she may not want to hear it, she is proud that I stood up for myself and I was able to advocate for myself. So I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like sometimes honoring them is, you taught me to stand up for myself, because it's like they tell you to stand up for yourself until you have to stand up to them. And then we also run into the, respect your elders. Well, baby, we all grown at this point because I'm almost 40. So no one's about to talk out the side of their neck to me. And I am not going to diminish my feelings on the account of somebody else, even if I came out of you. I have to honor myself. With that being said, me setting healthy boundaries is honoring myself. And honestly, I touched on it a little bit the other day. I think a part of learning what your boundaries are, sometimes you have to sit by yourself and you need to sit quietly. I've spent a lot of time by myself over the past 3 years, sometimes literally in silence, sometimes literally in silence for days. And when you start having self-realization moments, you truly enjoy yourself, have conversations with yourself. When you reemerge, you realize who and what irritates you. You see what triggers you and what sets you off. Start digging into what sets you off and why, which many people, whether you've heard it or not, that's what we call doing shadow work. That shadow that sits behind us, those are all our triggers, right? And I started doing shadow work. And shadow work is healing that inner child. Find something that triggers you and then literally start what triggered me? Well, why did it trigger me? What happened in my childhood that I remembered that, and that makes me mad and makes me anxious or whatever it is? Doing that shadow work and breaking that shit down, you realize a lot of shit. And then sometimes it does help you realize, oh, well, they did the best that they could or whatever. Again, I am not negating. Sometimes parents do some really fucked up shit. Okay? And this is not a spill tea about my life. I tell people all the time, I might look cute, but my story ain't. I've been through some shit. And I have definitely been through shit with my parents or at the expense of my parents. I just have. Okay? But going from that on how to set healthy boundaries, and someone also asked an example of, yes, that is shadow work. Break those triggers down, literally get to the root and the bottom of it. And when you have that laid out, you free yourself of that and you can move freely and you don't have to harbor and hold all of those things, right? So, and then you build coping mechanisms from that. Healthy ones. I didn't realize until I started therapy that my coping mechanism was not holding people accountable. My coping mechanism was forgiving people. My toxic trait was forgiving people or not holding people accountable. But I learned that from my parents. I learned that from my parents because I was always like a little too old in the brain growing up. I was always aware, even from a very young age, I was aware that my mom didn't have the capacity for certain things and certain conversations. So I took on a lot of weight of things because, she may have done something wild, but not holding her accountable, like, oh, she just did what she knew. By not telling someone how you felt or what they did, I then shouldered everything. So my coping mechanism was don't hold anyone accountable, being understanding, oh, well, they did this fucked up thing because, but that didn't change how I felt, right? The first thing is verbalizing it. Verbalize the boundary. I have verbalized the boundary of, I know this is not just a me thing. I know this is a Black mama thing. I'm sure 99% of y'all in here will be like, your mama love running to tell your business to other people. Mamas love to gossip. They got all the tea. I can speak for myself. Like when I see those memes, they be like, oh, it's nothing like when your mama call you a tea. Like, I don't like that shit. Do not call me with nobody else's business. I don't like it. Or like my mom does this thing where for a long time it was like, I was like, she gotta find some friends. Because every time she called me, it was just bad news, but bad news about somebody else, someone that I didn't know. Like when your mama call you like, oh, hey girl, what's up? And I'm like, nothing. And then she'll pause. She'll be like, okay. Yeah, girl, Tammy got a brain tumor. Who is Tammy? And why do I need to know she has a brain tumor? So like, that is like, for me, I don't want negative news. I didn't want to take on anybody else's stuff. And I think the first time I set a boundary with my mom was in high school. My mom would come home from work and want to like dump and tell me about her day. And one day I literally just stopped her and I said, hey, you're killing my high. And she was like, excuse me. And I was like, I need you to find a friend that you can vent to. But I had a wonderful day and I don't want to take this on. Can you go talk to someone else? And she was upset, but I had to set that boundary. I had a good day. And every single day you come home being negative, talking about how shitty your day was. I don't want to hear it. You got to go find somebody else to talk to about that. But if you don't verbalize that boundary, no one knows. And this is friends too. No one knows. If someone needs you outside of that capacity, then that is for them to tell you. Like, I'm sitting here with Brianka right now. Brianka will text me, hey sis, do you have the capacity for me to talk and let this out? Yep. She will do that. And you need people to do that. That is a boundary I have set with people. And because people know how I am, they honor that. I reiterate that. Don't call me with no mess. If you need me, I'm there. But if that's all you ever got for me, no. But see what someone has space for, right? So even with so the first thing, setting a boundary, you have to verbalize it. You have to explicitly state what it is. Are they always going to go for it? No. But like Shamira stated, reiterate it. Let them know. This wasn't me in my feelings that day. This is a boundary. Do not speak to me in this manner. It is a boundary, but you have to verbalize it because they don't know. And a lot of us, our parents are not used to us talking back because it's stay in a child's place. Baby, I'm not a child no more. I am your child, but I am not a child, right? The follow-up to that was someone asked, how do you keep the same energy without getting disrespectful? Here is the thing about that. keeping the same energy with your parents without getting disrespectful. I'm just going to say that sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you got to match energies to let them know how serious you are about the boundary. Okay? Sometimes you just have to match the energy. I have to match energies with my father because sometimes it depends on the type of parent you're dealing with. I don't have to match energies with my mother. I can set the boundary. If she steps too far, I can fall back. My daddy, I gotta go toe to toe with that nigga. Period. But that is something I'm willing to do to let him know you not finna talk to me crazy. Period. Unfortunately, I think if you're dealing with a narcissist, a gaslighter, someone who is mentally and emotionally and verbally abusive, baby, keeping it cute ain't gonna work. Sometimes you have to match energies. Again, we have to see our parents as people and flawed humans at that. But we also have to be aware, again, because this is pathology and this is generational and this is cyclical. You know, they don't have the tools because their parents didn't have the tools. Because, for example, someone asked the question, addressing toxic behaviors between your mother and your grandmother. Someone asked, and especially for the mother-daughter strain relationships, because I think a lot of times people just always assume it's a woman has daddy issues. And a lot of people are not talking about the strained mother-daughter relationships. And sometimes I think that shit is worse than the daddy issues, if we're being quite honest. Sometimes I think mommy issues are worse than the daddy issues. But someone asked specifically, addressing toxic behaviors between your mother and your grandmother. So this has been a heavy one, and one that I have been very committed to, because I have had to step in, interfere between my mom and my grandmother. One thing that I can say about if you have both your mother and your grandmother still here, one thing I can say and encourage you, because most times, like, if your situation is like mine, of course, my grandmother loves me. She'll have conversations with me. But honestly, you know, I didn't really grow up around my grandmother like that, or a lot of my family, really. I'm not close with my first cousins. Like, I know most of them on my mom's side. Really don't know any on my dad's side. Like, my parents were like very excluded from their families. And part of my mom and my grandmother was we weren't around her. So I honestly did not start spending more time with my grandmother and getting to know her more until I was in college, to be very honest. So I don't have those grandma stories growing up like other people had. And that, in turn, is because of the relationship my mom and my grandmother had. Something that I have intentionally done now is I have conversations with my grandmother and I ask her questions about her life, but I have my mom sitting right there. Because my grandmother is more open to telling me things and sharing and imparting wisdom with me. in a way that my mom, one, she would not do with my mom, or two, if she did, my mother would not be able to receive it. So I ask my grandmother important questions that then leads to my mom having an aha moment, and then I can look at her and be like, so would you like to give her some grace? Right? Because we're also dealing with parents who want grace from us, but aren't even willing to give grace to their own parents. And I refuse to be 60, 80, 90 years old and still mad at my mama. I'm not doing it, because that shit's gone. You deal and you move on, you cope, you find your coping mechanisms, and you move forward. But for example, my great-grandmother got married when she was 14 years old and started having children at 15 years old. So my question to my grandmother, with my mother sitting there, what did your mother teach you about being a woman? And my grandmother looked me dead in my face and said, she couldn't teach me shit. She didn't know shit about being a woman. So then I had to look at my mom like, well, how was she supposed to teach you about being a woman? Because her mama didn't teach her about being a woman, because she was 15 years old, because her mama sat her on the porch and let some man take her away when she was 14 years old. So her mama didn't teach. That's 4 generations of someone not teaching you how to be a woman. And you're mad at this woman because you didn't like how she parented you. So for me, part of addressing the toxic relationship between my mother and my grandmother, because I am very adamant that I refuse to let that be the cycle for me. I saw that cycle very early. And I was like, I have to stop it. Like, honestly, it was to the point where I literally would say, God, give me boys. I didn't even want a girl, because I was like, this shit stops with me. I didn't even want a girl. Now I'd love a cute little mini me. Hopefully she'll have more forehead, but that's neither here nor there. But, you know, I was so scared of perpetuating that cycle that I was like, it has to stop with me, because I saw how toxic and detrimental that was. And I will say, my mom still doesn't fully get it. Mother's Day weekend is like really tough. Like, when I literally see my mom at almost 60 years old, like having temper tantrums, basically, like around my grandmother, because she has unhealed child trauma that she's not addressing. That's very hard to see. But I definitely, you know, have like asked my mom, like, you know, my mom wants grace from me, because one of her favorite things, you know, like when they're like, oh, you know, like the mom, like, I just hope I didn't fuck y'all up, you know, things like that. You know, I did the best I could with what I knew. What makes you think your mom wasn't doing the same thing? What makes you think grandma was not trying to do the same thing with y'all? The 7 of y'all in the 60s and 70s, when women couldn't even get a bank loan. And she left your abusive daddy and said, fuck it, I'm still going to do this on my own. And y'all survived. If you want me to give you grace, you have to understand that you need to give your mother grace and understand. But they can't always. So for that, I would say, ask questions if your grandmother is around or things like that. Ask some questions and kind of get, you know, to the nitty gritty. Like, I ask all the questions, and I literally am like, I know for a fact I'm the only one who asked my grandmother these questions, and I still need to edit the footage, but I spent about an hour and a half recording me asking my grandmother the weekend of her 91st birthday, asking her a lot of questions about her life and her experiences, which I know in turn shaped her and also how she parented. And, you know, of course, not perfect. No one is, but if you got some mommy issues, one, see her as a woman. And if you saw the same thing, you know, happening between your mom and your grandmother, if you have both of them still here, ask some questions. And honestly, sometimes get them to just ask questions. Just be the mediator and ask questions just in between them. And you'd be surprised at things that will come out. Another question I got was, how to forgive without an apology. How to forgive a toxic parent without an apology. Shayna says, it is a conscious decision to change. I find our parents are not open to receiving our perspective. They're not. And that literally leads into forgiving without an apology. Because Shayna just said it. They don't see it from our perspective. Because the apology is not coming. You may literally see it in their face sometimes that they had an aha moment. But a lot of times, and this is, again, we're talking about toxic parent relationships. So I'm pretty sure I can use this as a blanket statement, because if you are here and you are wondering, concerned, you're probably dealing with the same type of parent or one of the categories. Baby, that apology is not coming. Maybe on their deathbed, maybe in their will and testament. And even then, I'm not waiting for it. Literally, I will be 37 in September. And I have never in my life, even with anyone, even outside of me, heard my father apologize for anything. It's a strong maybe, Shayna. I'm not waiting for it. I think what helps me forgive without an apology, going back to the seeing them as flawed humans first. I think it also goes to, if I'm speaking from, and I know everyone may not be the same, but despite what some of y'all may think, she's science, spirits, stones, and all the things, right? I still read, the Bible. I know some things, but what I can say is, especially if you were dealing with someone who wants to browbeat you with the Bible, in general, as humans, a lot of people want forgiveness, the same forgiveness and grace that they're not willing to give. So the first thing for me about forgiveness without an apology is that I'm not making it about anybody else. Like it's literally to free me. I have to free me first. Because it goes back to that boundary. I have to honor me before I honor my parents, period. And if seeing you as a human, seeing you as a flawed person, having some understanding and some grace, that in turn allows me to forgive you. Because the apology is not coming. I just don't center it on them. And I just make this for my own freedom and my own personal peace. I have to. Something that I've been working on, because I had to start asking myself, even outside of my parents, like if it was anything, why do I feel I want the apology so bad? Not even that you need it. Why do you feel you want the apology so bad? The apology is not necessary for me to forgive you. And I know for me, the biggest thing was I wanted you to acknowledge what you did. But a lot of apologies and things that we're looking for, I was just talking to my girlfriend who is a licensed therapist before. Brittany, if you're still in here, we literally were just talking about this a couple of hours ago. That changed behavior, one comes with like self-realization, like self-awareness. Then it comes with accountability. And then it comes with willingness to change. And 9 times out of 10, you're a toxic parent, for whatever their trauma response, their reasons, or whatever it is, they're not capable of doing those things. So the apology is not coming. So if you feel you need an apology or you're looking for an apology, one, kind of sit with yourself and ask yourself, why do I feel I want it or need it so bad? And if you're anything like me, it's because you want someone to be accountable. You want someone to take accountability, and, you want someone to be aware. But you also have to have the frame of reference. If you were dealing with a certain personality type, if you were dealing with a narcissist, if you were dealing with a gaslighter, if you were dealing with someone who is mentally, physically, emotionally abusive, if you were dealing with someone who is a drug addict, they're not going to be able to be accountable. They are not self-aware. So you're looking for something that you're not going to get. Let it go. And remember that it's centered on yourself. The forgiveness don't have anything to do with them. It's not you doing them a favor. None of that. It's for you. It's so I can sleep at night. I forgive you. But because I am setting boundaries, while I forgive you for what you did, don't do that shit again. Someone also asked how not to lose your mind when the boundaries aren't working. And as Shamira said earlier, we have to constantly reiterate them, constantly reiterate the boundaries. And I know sometimes that is difficult and that is frustrating. And sometimes it is easy as pulling back. I'm not saying shut down, but pulling back. I am no stranger to creating a consequence. The same way y'all do with y'all children. These parents are children too. I am no stranger to my boundary being, I am not answering the phone. I am not responding. I am only responding to certain things. Listen, just like children, they test boundaries. Listen, these parents are habitual fucking line steppers. And they feel validated in it because they are the parent. Period. And they try and test you your whole life. And they invalidate your feelings. When you were coming up, it was stay in your place, don't say nothing, don't speak out of turn. So then you don't say nothing, but then you become adult and you say something, and now all of a sudden it's disrespectful. No, I've been sitting on this shit for 30 years. Even though I actually was never the child to sit on it. That was probably my problem. I never sat on what I had to say. But then when you have parents that ask you what you were thinking and feeling and then say, well, it don't matter. You're just a kid. You start ingraining that in yourself. And then there was a point where, I talk a lot, but you weren't getting certain things out of me because was ingrained in me that my thoughts and my feelings didn't matter, right? It's the audacity and the entitlement of parents. And my thing is, I never want to do that with a child. I always want my child to be able to freely tell me, if I did something that got on your nerves, let me know. If I did something that made you feel a certain way, let me know. If my child had a bad day and just didn't want to talk today, I don't have to talk to you. If my child going to need some space, the same way you come home and you want to decompress, you need some space. Child, these kids need decompression and space from y'all too. Period. These kids, honestly, some of y'all, these kids are no different than your spouse or your significant other. The same way your nigga don't want to walk through the door and you're immediately nagging him. These kids don't want that shit either. Everyone deserves space and autonomy for their thoughts and their feelings. And a lot of our parents have just told us we are not deserving or entitled to that. We can't have that. So when do you learn that, right? But me not losing my mind when I'm trying to set boundaries, I fall back. And I think even in friendships, where some people some of my good real friends are in here, and y'all, I'm sure y'all can attest and tell people I will fade to black quick when I am overwhelmed. Look, raise your hand, Brianka. With the quickness. I will fade to black quick. And something that I always would tell people is no one's exempt. Because I do this shit with my family too. I will go 6 months without talking to my father. I have gone 2 years without talking to my mother and live less than 5 miles away. Do what you need to do for self. Period. Because it's no difference than you setting a boundary and setting a consequence with your own child. You can do it with your parents too. Period. Fall back. Get gone. Because life is life for everybody. And especially if y'all are out here raising your own children. Child, I'm not going to have time to be dealing with you and your shit. And I got to raise these ones over here. And now that energy is trickling down to the ones I got in this house. No. Not at all. Fall back. Self-preservation. You don't have to talk to anybody, and that is including your parents. It does not mean I love you any less. It does not mean if I get a call that I got to pull up, that I'm not going to pull up. Listen, she said, that's when you unlock a new level of self-love and respect. Absolutely. Absolutely. Something that I didn't mention that I do want to mention is if you have the opportunity or you're in a situation where you are faced with whether they ask or you willingly tell a parent something that they did or something that happened. I don't want to say something that they did. I mean, sometimes it is something that they did, but if you share an experience from your perspective as their child that happened with your parent, I think it's good to have all of the other tools and things in place first before you do that. Being able to see them as a human, being able to know that they, whether you do or not know the tools that they had available in parenting you, being able to forgive without an apology. I think it's best to, sorry, I don't know why my nose keeps itching. I think it's best to have those things in place before you are faced with a situation where you share something from your experience, because then you're better prepared for their potential wild response. Whether you're dealing with the narcissist like my dad, when you share your experience and he says, I knew you had a great imagination, but I didn't know you just made things up. Like it didn't happen. Or knowing that you have a parent who then or the parent that plays the victim, and then it's, oh, I knew I was so horrible, like I should have committed suicide type thing. Have all your tools ready, because if you ever share with them your experience and you are met with either you are crazy or deranged, or or the victim, that you basically can just brush it off. Just wanted you to know that this is why I set these boundaries. It helps me to kind of just meet them where they are, and then sometimes leave them where they are. And that is how I'm able to move forward now, because I've fully accepted who they are and fully aware that at this point, them being 58 years old, that they more than likely are not going to change, are not willing to change, do not have the capacity, the capability, or the willingness to change. I hope that this was helpful, validated someone, freed someone, comforted someone in some way. I do want to compile. I know that there was a book mentioned on the last, on part 1. I didn't write it down, but I have heard about that book before. I definitely will link that in the recap. I'll link the book that was mentioned. There was another book that was suggested to me.
It didn't start with you? Remember that one?
No, but if anybody has books, hold on. I know for a fact. Bonsoir. Look, don't ask me to speak any more French than that. I can give you some un, deux, trois, quatre, but I ain't got shit else. There was a book that someone else has suggested to me, and I meant to write it down, but let me see. Oh, a book. The Body Keeps the Score. Okay, so I'm going to start writing these down, and so I can put them in the recap. The Body Keeps the Score. Oh, shit. Oh, Brianka already has it. Well, would you look at that? This is... Get you some friends who read. What else you got on that bookshelf, bitch? All right, so The Body Keeps the Score.
I mean, this is like... kind of goes with...
Oh, yeah, Tania did tell me about this one. We also have Healing the Child Within. I am sharing these. I have not read these, but we are going to put these in our repertoire. Have you heard of You Got Me Fucked Up? No, I have not, but you know me. I will put that on the list.
Boom, here it is.
Because I do what? Point you in the direction where you got me fucked up at. We also have It Didn't Start With You. Let the church say amen, okay?
And again.
And amen again. This is pathology. What does Iyanla say? Pathology. Look, even though Iyanla's not licensed, but hey, bitch, neither am I. It didn't start with you. So I'm going to put that on the list as well. Therapy. Therapy. A good therapist. Therapy. But in regards to therapy, if and when you find a good resource for you, a good therapist for you, and I did a blog post about this. I'll probably have to run that back. If you are someone who has not started your journey with therapy, thinking about it, want to, know that you need to, there are a couple of things to be aware of. One is go when you're ready. Don't let anybody else force you to go. Listen, we love resourceful queens, right? Go when you are ready to go to therapy. You can know that you need to go, but you need to be ready because, and I say that because too, it's going to get real. Therapy, if you are looking for someone to just validate you and tell you that you are right in your pain and in your trauma, you're no different than your parent who is just sitting there playing the victim. Honestly. If you are not ready to have some self-realization, some self-actualizations, to take accountability and ownership for your own shit, how you have internalized things, or whatever that may be, don't go. Don't waste your money if you want to. But if you, because if and when you find your therapist, you need to be ready to be honest. Honest. You can't lie. You can't lie. You're wasting your time and you're doing yourself a disservice. Therapy is going to do you a world of good, especially if you are looking for or needing help with reassurance and support with setting boundaries with your parents, which, while it can be hard for anybody, I definitely believe it's harder for us as Black children. It just is. Because honestly, if we are, and not to get super nerdy, but I just am. If we are, and we're also talking about, because we're talking about books and literature, if you have ever read Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
I have that downstairs. It's boxed up though.
Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed talks about the cycle of oppression. And the basis is you can't come from being oppressed without oppressing the next person, right? So if we even look at the pathology and the history of the Black family, the Black American family, if we are even looking at that pathology and history as it started with slavery, and then we get to Jim Crow and Reconstruction, all of these things, right? So basically it's, you can't come out from being oppressed without oppressing the next person. So we have the slave master who is now oppressing the Black man. You've been in the field all day. Okay, you turn around, you get back to your space. Who are you then oppressing? The first person that's in your face. That's your wife and your kids. So now you're oppressing your wife. You're treating her like shit. Not saying that this is always happens, but I'm just talking about the pathology and the cycle. So then the parents then do it to the children. Okay, well then you go about living life and you are now feeling at the bottom of the totem pole, whether it's corporate America or whatever like that. You turn around, you do what? Do it to your kids. That's what I mean by pathology and the cycle of oppression. So when you understand constructs like that, sometimes it's easier to take yourself out of it. Not saying to accept it, but you can have an understanding of something. So I understand how things are and the pathology of things. Doesn't mean I have to accept it, but I'm just saying, we're talking about literature. I think that's a good one to read. Not even dealing with parents. That's just dealing with life and oppression. Just as people of color, brown people, period, need to read that book. A lot of shit will make sense if it did make sense to you already, or at least just validate things that you already knew to be true. So I don't know if anyone else had any other questions. I definitely feel more comfortable now. I don't know why I had so much anxiety on part 1. I literally had anxiety starting around 4 o'clock.
This is what you do. I understand.
I mean, a certain level of transparency, while yes, this is what I do,
You're amazing.
this was a little bit more sensitive to me because it was just a little bit more sensitive to me because even though I said my mama was not permitted to be on this live, it's still
touchy.
It's just still touchy. I mean, for me, yes, I do share things with everyone, but I'm still way more private than most people would think. Because like I said, I'm cute, but my story's not. And I'm still, it's not a protect them type of thing. I am still aware that they are people first. I do know that, my mom may actually watch it later. I know my dad is someone who, if he were to see it, I don't know, that man might kick me out. Who knows? But I'm still just aware of other people and their growth or, acceptance, willingness, or lack thereof. Thank you. I definitely don't feel brave, but thank you. But I am just aware that I am aware that sometimes my transparency, albeit small, is still validating and freeing to someone else. Because I know in a lot of things we feel like we're alone. And, we're not, and we all may not be dealing with the same type of toxic parent. There's definitely levels to this shit. But, if I could sum up everything, is honor yourself before you honor them. You have to see them as people, see them as flawed people, but you gotta honor yourself before you honor them. Flat out. But honestly, going back to like the toxic parenting thing, I often think about that. I think about how many days I wake up and I'm like, and I say this as someone who does not have children yet. I often wake up where I'm like, adulting is ghetto as fuck. I don't want to do this. But imagine waking up and having that feeling, and you got 3 little niggas down the hall. Nigga, I'm struggling and it's just me. I don't want to do this and it's just me. Becoming a parent doesn't change that. You still think adulting is ghetto, but now you have other people that you're responsible for. I'm scratching and surviving. It's just me and Chloe. And y'all see how hard that is for me? We be fighting. I fight a dog daily. So just imagine, and that's something that I do think about to put things into perspective when it comes to dealing with my parents. I put that into perspective. I don't want to be doing this shit most days. And I'm sure there were a number of days that they didn't want to do shit either. But they had to do it. And not having the tools. So I think about that sometimes. I hope this conversation was helpful, validated someone, made someone feel seen, freed somebody. Honor yourself, love yourself, put yourself first, and establish your boundaries. I love you all. Have a wonderful evening.